Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, Shri Giraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 27, Chapter 7, Text 27. Ritvija Uchu Tattvam Nate Vayam Nanjana Rudra Sampat Tattam Karmanya Vagradiyo Bhagavan Vidamaha. Dharmo Palaksham Idam Tirvrid Advarakyam. Gyanat Yad Ardam Adidaivam Madho Vyavasta. Ritvija Uchu Tattvam Nate Vayam Nanjana Rudra Sampat Karmanya Vagrahadiyo Bhagavan Vidamaha. Dharmo Palaksham Idam Trivrid Advarakyam. Jnana Gyatam yad artam adidaiva mado vyavasta. Tongue twister, huh? Ritvija uchu Tadvam na deva yamananjana rudra sampat Karmanyavagrahadiyo bhagavan vidamaha. Dharmopalaksham idam trivrid advarakyam. Gyatam yad artam adideva mado vyavasta. Anyone would like to try? Mataji, let's try. Ritvija uchu Tadvam na devayam ananjana rudra sampa Karmanyavagrahadiyo bhagavan vidamaha. Trivid atavarkyam. Yatam yad artam adidevatam madovyavasta. Ritvija uchu Tadvam na devayam ananjana rudra sampa Karmanyavagrahadiyo bhagavan vidamaha. Dharmopalakshanamidam trividavarkyam. Gyatam tad artam adideva mado vyavasta. This is a word for word. Ritvija, the priests, Uchu, began to say, Tatvam, truth, na, not, te, of your lordship, Vayam, all of us, Ananjana, without material contamination, Rudra, Lord Shiva. Sorry, lost track of this. Sapat, by his curse. Karmani, in fruitive activities. Avagraha, being too much attached. Diya, of such intelligence. Bhagavan, O Lord. Vidama, know. Dharma, religion. Upalakshanam, symbolized. Idam, this. Trivrit, the three departments of knowledge of the Vedas. Advara, sacrifice. Akyam, of the same name, of the name. Yatam, known to us. Yat, that. Artam, for the matter of. Adidevam, for worshipping the demigods. Adha, this. Vyavasta, arrangement. The priests address the Lord, saying, O Lord, transcendental to material contamination, by the curse offered by Lord Shiva's men, we have become attached to fruitive activities, and thus we are now fallen, and therefore do not know anything about you. On the contrary, we are now involved in the injunctions of the three departments of the Vedic knowledge, under the plea of executing rituals in the name of a yajna. We know that you have made arrangements for distributing the respective shares of the demigods. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Vedas, as known as Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Bhagavad Gita 2:45. Those who are serious students of the Vedas are very much attached to the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas, and therefore these Vedavadis cannot understand the ultimate goal of the Vedas to understand Lord Krishna or Vishnu. Those who have transcended the qualitative Vedic attractions, however, can understand Krishna, who is never contaminated by material qualities. Therefore, Lord Vishnu is addressed here as Ananjana, free from material contamination. In Bhagavad Gita 2:42, the crude Vedic scholars have been depreciated by Krishna as follows: Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravadanti api vaschitaha veda vadarata parta nanyad ashtiti vadina. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, and they say that there is nothing more than this. Now, there's 2 verses before this that don't have a purport, so I'm just going to read them in the flow of the verses. When Lord Vishnu accepted the oblations offered in the sacrifice, Daksha, the Prajapati, began with great pleasure to offer respectful prayers unto him. The Supreme Personality is actually the master of all sacrifices and preceptor of all the Prajapatis. He is served even by such personalities as Nanda and Sunanda. Daksha addressed the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My dear Lord, you are transcendental to all speculative positions. You are completely spiritual, devoid of all fear. You are always in control of the material energy. Even though you appear in the material energy, you are situated transcendentally. You are always free from material contamination because you are self-sufficient. In today's verse, the priests address the Lord saying, O Lord, transcendental to material contamination, by the curse offered by Lord Shiva's men, we have become attached to fruitive activities, and thus we are now fallen. Therefore do not know anything about you. On the contrary, we are involved in the injunctions of the 3 departments of Vedic knowledge under the plea of executing rituals in the name of Yajna. We know that you have made arrangements for distributing the respective shares of the demigods. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Kadambhakanana Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Gurudas Chaitanya Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatta Deshatarine. Once Srila Prabhupada told Mother Yamuna that if you don't know, if you feel like you have a service that you can't do, and it's like you don't have the capability to do it, then you should just recite these two mantras, Om Jnana Timirandasya and Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam. The mantras to the Guru and the mantra to Rupa Goswami. And if you recite those mantras, then you will be given the empowerment to carry out that devotional service. I always like to remember that. It comes in handy. So where we are today in the story about Daksha and everything that was before it, in a very short recap, there is Daksha, he's the head priest, he's performing this sacrifice. His daughter is Sati, she's married to Lord Shiva. He doesn't like the son-in-law. He criticizes him, calls him really bad names, and refuses to even invite him into the place of worship. Sati, wanting to mend the relationship, visits him, and he ignores her, and she's seeing the plight of her father and the decrepit state of his consciousness due to offenses. Then commits suicide. He watches, the agents of Lord Shiva, infuriated by this action, attack the sacrifice, and Shiva, there's a war breaks out. Long story short, Daksha gets beheaded. He's given the head of a goat. And here is Daksha now offering these prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then everybody else in that assembly is now offering prayers. So we heard the prayer of Daksha. And then we heard the prayer of the priests who were doing the yajna. So, sorry. One small point is that in the verse that came before the one that we read today, I think it is the prayer. Just a second. Oh, I'm gone ahead of myself. Yeah. In the verse that comes before Daksha prays, it's said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the master of all sacrifices, preceptor of all the Prajapatis, and he is served by such personalities as Nanda and Sunanda. Anybody knows who's Nanda and Sunanda? Anybody heard of them? Well, yeah. Oh, were they? Possibly. Maybe. The only thing I got when I looked up was that they were the ones who take Dhruva to the spiritual world. In coming later in this canto is when the little boy Dhruva, it's a long story, but eventually he's going to the spiritual world, and these two agents of Vishnu come to take him, and they're the two, Nanda and Sunanda. Comes up later, so they get all this swan-like plane that comes, to take Dhruva to the spiritual world, and escorting Dhruva and his mother Suniti is Nanda and Sunanda. So they're like these transcendental air hostess. I wouldn't say hostesses because they're men, but they're these like transcendental pilots of Krishna's Vaikuntha planes. There are probably more to them, but that's as much as I know. The other part that I wanted to check is really to look into Daksha's prayer, because he mentions in his prayer, he's addressing Krishna and Krishna's qualities. Initially he's saying, Krishna, you are beyond speculation. Of course, we're not beyond speculation. He says, you are beyond speculation. Thank you so much. You're beyond speculation. That you're completely spiritual, you're chit. That you're devoid of fear, abhaya. That you are in control of the material energy, pratishta mayam. That you are situated transcendently, tistandhaya. that you are free from material contamination. Material contamination itself is called aparishuddha. That you are self-sufficient, atma tantra, and that you are ekam, one without a second. So it's interesting, right? So here's Daksha, and he has all this glorification of Krishna. And I wanted to look a little deeper into it. So Daksha is saying Krishna is beyond speculation. How do we know that Krishna is beyond speculation? Because he is the absolute truth. And also he has all knowledge. One of the 6 opulences. All knowledge is his, so why does he need to speculate? When you have knowledge, you don't need to speculate. When you don't have knowledge, then you speculate. You know? So Krishna is he has full knowledge. And how has Daksha lacked in knowledge? We're hearing of Daksha every day. So how has Daksha, in his actions, how has he been lacking in knowledge? Yes. Yes. And that's what it says, right? Our ego blinds our knowledge. It's like when your ego is rearing, the Bhagavad Gita becomes like tiny in the background, somewhere on the edge of the horizon. Can't see it anymore because you're blinded by your ego. It's not that Daksha didn't have the knowledge. It's that he couldn't tap into the knowledge. When Sanatana Goswami, I could be wrong here, but when Sanatana Goswami leaves Lord Chaitanya, after Lord Chaitanya instructs him, he tells Lord Chaitanya, please, you've given me this knowledge, now let it manifest in my heart. So there's a difference between like knowing things and actually being able to practice things. And that is intelligence. Knowledge is, I know the 10 offenses. Intelligence means I try to apply myself to avoiding the 10 offenses. That's intelligence, really. It's so funny because it's so underrated in this day and age as what real intelligence is. Because it's not just being able to by heart a piece of paper and regurgitate it. It's not being able to just tax your brain to analyze things in different ways. That's really not intelligence. Intelligence is being able to live by our principles. That's not easy, is it? It's not an easy thing. But that is intelligence. Daksha tells Krishna, Vishnu, Krishna, that you are all spiritual, chit matram. You are all spiritual. Why would he think that why is this important that he thinks that Krishna is all spiritual? Where has Daksha given in to the material energy? Because his desires overtook him. His desire for his own position overtook him. So he wasn't able to tap in to the spiritual dimension. Even though he was so elevated, Daksha means expert, but he wasn't able to tap in. He says, Krishna, you are abhayam, devoid of fear. And where was Daksha fearful? Anyone? How was Daksha fearful in this whole exercise? It's okay, you can suggest here. Jai Shri Radha. They'll make their appearance. That's it. Fear is it's such an underlying emotion. Shri Shri Radha ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Giraj Govardhan ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Fear is such an underlying emotion. It's underneath. You don't see it. Like someone can express real anger, but what's underneath it is fear. Someone can express, so many varieties of emotions, but underneath it is just fear. For example, like you're saying with Daksha, he was afraid. He was afraid of losing his position. He was insecure. And that's why when we cannot be happy for another person's success, when seeing how another person is progressing spiritually, when it depresses us, that means we are insecure. We're insecure in our own spiritual footing. And that insecurity is just there because of fear. When we feel envy because somebody has something, or whether it's a thing or a service or a position or a nature or whatever they may have that we may feel envious of, what's underneath it is fear. Fear that we may not be good enough like that person. So here's this powerful Daksha, and he's doing this big sacrifice. And he thinks he's expert enough to not need Shiva there, But underneath all of this is just fear. Fear that his position, his possessions, his advancement, all of these things are hollow. And it's true. It was hollow. So Krishna is Abhaya. He is beyond fear. Why? Because he's not insecure. He doesn't has anything that he is going to envy of somebody else. And of course, Abhaya, Krishna, takes us to Krishna running away. Whenever you hear of that quality of Krishna, makes me think of Mother Yashoda binding Krishna, and of course Kartik is just around the corner. Mother Yashoda binding Krishna, and the verse that says that here he is, the fearless Supreme Lord, but he is running in the courtyard afraid of Mother Yashoda's stick. So does Krishna become fearful? Yes. Is he Abhaya? Yes. Because he will become fearful if that is the rasa. If that gives joy to his devotees, then he will become fearful. But otherwise, there's nothing for him to fear. In control of the material energy. And didn't Daksha lose control? Didn't he just simply lose control? Completely. Complete loss of control. Completely under the three modes of material nature. And that's the thing, right? When we're under the modes, we can never see it. So hard to see it when the modes are ruling us. When the modes is acting upon us and we get defensive and we get self-righteous and we feel like, how could this be happening to me? But we're completely under the sway of the modes. And Krishna, he is in control of the material energy. Never, not for one moment, not for a millisecond, not for an iota, does he come under the sway of the modes. And how many moments in our life are we above the modes of nature? Maybe in one ecstatic kirtan, for half a split second. Otherwise, so that's Krishna above the modes. Free from material contamination. Because that's what Daksha was, right? Contaminated. His consciousness was contaminating everything he was doing. Because he had this critical consciousness and he couldn't get out of it. So therefore everything was contaminated. Even though everything appeared pure. You would ask, who contaminated the area of the sacrifice? Lord Shiva's agents, because they came and they desecrated the area of sacrifice when Sati entered into fire. But that's not true. They did not desecrate the sacrifice. Daksha's consciousness had already contaminated the area. It was already contaminated, even though it all appeared pristine and according to regulations and according to ritual. But it was empty. It was empty like the prayers of the priests that come up in the next verse. The prayers of the priests, and they say that, what do they say? They say, on the contrary, we are now involved in the injunctions of the three departments of Vedic knowledge under the plea of executing rituals in the name of yajna. Fake. In one word, that's what it means. Fake. Simply a ritual under the name of a yajna. Because what was that sacrifice all about? Daksha's ego. You think Daksha didn't think that Sati would want to come? You think Daksha didn't have in mind that it was an offense not to invite Lord Shiva? It was there. It was behind in his consciousness, even as he thought about the sacrifice, thought about setting up this yajna. It was there. Because the higher I could position myself, then the lower Shiva would be. So therefore, contaminated consciousness is such a painful thing to have. Because it's so hard to let go of. It's like when you get a piece of bubble gum under your shoe, but worse. It's like when you if you put your hands in glue and then suddenly it all sticks, everything is just stick. You can't clean it because your one hand got glue and the other hand can't clean the other hand that got glue, and now it's all one sticky mess. It's very hard to clean it. So this contaminated consciousness, it sticks to us. Like someone does something to you, someone says something to you. For days you can think about it. Days. It's like this background track, instrumental, playing in your head again and again and again and again. And they may only have done it one time, but by the end of your lifetime, they've done it like 5 million times because you just kept playing the track again and again. And that's how contaminated consciousness is. So sticky, so hard to get rid of. It really needs that outside endeavor, that outside hand that says wake up. It needs that beheading for us to be able to say, oh yeah, what am I doing? Why am I wasting my time on this? So, Krishna is self-sufficient. It's very hard to be self-sufficient, right? Especially for us, because we can never be. We can't be self-sufficient because we are by nature dependent. And when we don't depend on Krishna, then we'll be dependent on other things. We'll always be dependent. There's no other way for us around that. Dependent we will be. We can only choose who to depend on. But for Krishna, he is self-sufficient. He doesn't need our pakoras and chutney. He doesn't need for us to come and offer him our Kali Yuga variety of gems and jewels, half made of plastic from the China shop. He doesn't need it. He's not craving pasta and pizza. He's satisfied. He gets the love of Srimati Radharani in the spiritual world. What on earth would he need it for? But here's the magnanimity of the Supreme Person, that self-satisfied does not mean selfish. Because in his self-satisfied nature, he appreciates love. And so for the sake of allowing us to express, he's like, okay, I'll stand here and wear the China jewels. Because you want to put it on for me. So I accept that sentiment, Bhaktavatsal. I'll accept that sentiment. But I'm not in need for it. And something like that you'll notice in life when you desperately want something. You desperately want something. Whatever it is, a job, a partner, a house, some state, whatever it is, it never comes. It will never come. And the more burning the desire is, the harder it is to get it. And the more you sacrifice to get it, and the more frustrated you become. But suddenly when you think, actually, I don't need this, it comes running. Anyone experience that? Anyone had that experience? It'll come, but I didn't ask for this. Yeah, now you got accepted for Krishna and not be attached. That's just the way it works. So that's how Krishna is, He's not burning for any type of material enjoyment. And that in itself is hard to appreciate. That Krishna relishes simply the sentiment that we offer. And that's his self-sufficiency. That's his self-sufficiency. So in Daksha giving this prayers, he's seeing the glories of Krishna, but he's also seeing everything that he was not. Because in seeing everything he was not, that's how he is seeing the glories of Krishna. And that's how he comes to this realization of worshipping Krishna in that way. So Dinabandhu Prabhu, he also gave this, a class on these verses. And he was giving this example. He said, Bhakti is simple. Bhakti is very simple. He says there was a temple in South India, and there was a sparrow who was on the top of the temple, the chakra. And this hawk, it came and it was circling around the sparrow. Because the sparrow knows, the hawk is not just doing parikram, the hawk is going to eat me. So the sparrow tries to escape. And inadvertently, the sparrow is also circumambulating the chakra, the parikram path. And then the hawk catches the sparrow, and the sparrow dies. And the sparrow, Dinabandhu Prabhu says, goes back to Vaikuntha, because as it died, it was doing parikram around the Lord. And he says, Bhakti is that simple. It's so simple, so easy to do, not difficult. And he said, the difficult thing is avoiding the offenses. Bhakti is simple. Difficult thing, avoid the offenses. And he was giving the example of the 6 different types of offenses that you can make to devotees. And I was listening while I was doing stuff, so I couldn't take them down. But one of it he mentioned is, obviously, if you speak critically of a devotee, if you are envious of a devotee, if you... and the one that always gets us, if you're not joyful when you see a devotee. If your heart doesn't open with joy when you see a devotee. And I was thinking about this one because once I had vac work when I was in Ruston. So we had some vacation work in Rustenburg. And for me, that's just another word for hell. If for anybody who lives in Rustenburg, my apologies. But it was so tough. Because here I was living with these people who were not devotees in a dormitory style sitting, and I was also a fanatic Hare Krishna, and I had to sharing a room, and I set up my whole altar in the TV cabinet. The poor girl who lived with me, she must have thought I was crazy. And and then every time I had to cook something at an offer, I'd have to cross the living room to get into my room to do the offering, right? Which means I had to go past all the people who were watching TV, seeing me with this tray, taking it. It was crazy. But it was so hard to chant, so hard to just I remember having to chant with one earphone in my ear, so that I wouldn't have to hear the conversation that the girl was having with her boyfriend. We were staying together. Or trying to chant outside in the cold, or, there was no lights. I almost got knocked once when I was trying to do a japa walk. So it was intense. And I remember after coming back from that trip, it was so solid in my heart that any devotee I see, I'm raised off a dandavats to. Whichever devotee it is, it doesn't matter. I'll offer flat out dandavats just because the person knows Krishna. I may not agree with the person, I may have a different nature to the person. Just because the person knows Krishna, it's enough. It's enough. So to be joyous when you meet a devotee, to welcome, he said, if you don't welcome a devotee properly, that's offensive. Now I'm thinking how many times sometimes people come and I'm not there, or I didn't leave my room to be part of the welcome party. It's like, oh my God, that's offensive. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's offensive. And he gave the example of people who are cultured so he said, in this house of a cultured Brahmana, somebody had walked in, and the person who owned the house had already eaten. So, like, that was it for the day. There's no fridge, you can't call in for Mahaprasad, can't run down to the shop right and get stuff, So that devotee was there, had tears in his eyes because he couldn't offer anything. There was nothing to offer the Brahmana who entered his house. And I was thinking, like, whoa. We're going to think, like, oh God, they always come now. We're meant to have supper. Like, why do they always come at this time? Don't they know? So yeah, just be able to welcome people and not ignore them. And ignoring people can go on very different levels. The Kali Yuga brand of Vaishnav Aparad can take it into different ways. Ignoring people's WhatsApps, ignoring people's calls, ignoring people's email. Not just ignoring people because your shoes is inside and you don't want to open the door. Different ways of ignoring people, right? To be always happy to see a Vaishnav. The interesting thing you see in this prayer of especially the priests, because I spoke now about the prayer of Daksha, but following that is the prayer of the priests. The interesting thing about the prayer of the priests is that they say that by the curse offered by Shiva's men, we have become attached to fruitive activities, and thus we are now fallen, and they do not know, and therefore we do not know anything about you. Because of their actions, because they aligned with Daksha to perform this ceremony, and therefore they were implicated in the offense. Because they had done that, their knowledge was stolen, and they became attached to a lower level of worship. Isn't that scary? Because you think, like, you did this to that devotee, and it has nothing to do with what you're facing, 1 year down the line or something. But 1 year down the line, all these desires emerge in the heart, and you're like, I wonder how that happened. Become attached to a lower level of worship. Jnanivas Prabhu also spoke on this verse, and he was saying that the flowery words of the Veda, it comes up here in this purport, it says these are poisonous flowers. They look nice. They give you rewards. You'll become happy. You can get your material enjoyment. But they're poisonous flowers. What's the poison? The poison is it keeps you here in this world. The poison is that it keeps you selfish. Because what's the difference between bhakti and fruitive activities? Simply that it's for Krishna's pleasure. But how easy it is to, under the guise of bhakti, keep a fruitive mentality. Every time that I'm attached to the result, what is that but karma kanda with the flavor of bhakti? Every time I want something else as a reward for my devotional service. I've been serving for so long now, they should have at least ... You can fill in the blank. Every time we want that reward, what is it but the poisonous flowers of fruitive activity blooming in our heart? So to truly be detached from the result is such a hard thing, especially for people ruled by passion. And where are we but planet Earth, where people in the mode of passion take birth? So, we're going to be ruled by it, being attached to the result. The service didn't work. It failed. But no service fails. The only failed service is a service that you didn't think to do, or the service that you didn't want to do. That's a failed service. No other service is failed. But do you know how difficult it is to overcome this fear of failure? Two things happen. in the fear of failure. One is, it keeps you nice, secure in your little hole so you don't try anything that's outside your comfort. No, Prabhu, I'm not qualified to give class. Nonsense. Nonsense. If we waited for everyone who is to be qualified to give a class, we won't have Bhagavatam class. But to transcend that fear of failure and say that what I'm doing may be imperfect, but that's okay, because I will take it in the spirit of service. That's a much higher mentality than to think, I'm not qualified to give Bhagavatam class. Of course you're not qualified to give Bhagavatam class. You're not Vyasadev. So going out of our comfort zone and getting a drop of a service that challenges us. When we're paralyzed by the fear of failure, because what's under that? What will people think? They'll find out that I can't quote Sanskrit shlokas, and I can't. So, you'll know I'm unlearned. Wow. Like you didn't know that before. So, paralyzed by the fear of failure, we don't step out of our comfort zone to do something for Krishna that is challenging for us, that is difficult for us. Now, the other side of that is that we may break our bodies to the last inch of existence in the name of this is for service for Krishna. But it may not be. It may not be. It may be that we have the mentality that, yes, Krishna, I want to give you everything. But is it also hiding behind that the fear of, I'll never be enough, so I have to keep doing instead of thinking? Because Jnana Yoga isn't Bhakti Yoga. And we are meant to think. We are meant to reflect on where we are spiritually. So it's so easy, right? The razor's edge. So easy to slip onto this side and slip onto that side and get all these cuts and bruises on the different sides that we slip on. So therefore, rising above the fruitive mentality can also mean, the other mentality that exists is like, yes, I will do it for Krishna. Yes, I get up, I do the big service, and then it just doesn't work out. And then I want to hide for 5 days to recover from the fact that it's just, nobody liked that darshan when I dressed that day, and the pujari scolded me. But what is it except that we have to accept that our intention is to offer the service, and we try our best. And whether the result is success or failure externally, it is not ours. And how freeing will it be? Can you imagine what freedom we will have if we were not attached to the result? Like, wow. How much hard drive space in your brain will be freed up? Like, when you have to go to WhatsApp and delete all your messages because there's no memory left in the phone. Yeah? That's how it is. You free up all this hard drive space. Because you don't have to keep constantly hampering on, because when we're attached to success and failure, it's because the result says something about me. Nobody liked the darshan, so it's a reflection on me. But when we're able to detach from the result, we realize it's not about me. Something Pastor Saraswati Maharaj likes to say, he says, do and die. Just do it and let your expectation of whatever result die. So rising above this fruitive mentality that the priests are talking about is a big deal. And what are they saying? They're saying, we do not know who you are. Because we've been overcome by attachment to these results, we do not know who you are anymore. And of course, when we are attached to the result, we don't know who's Krishna. Because it's about us and it's not about him. Duh. It's like, obviously, if it is about him, then we won't be attached. And this aspect of having to, of the subtle nature of offenses, and this is my last point, the subtle nature of offenses and how it is like an underneath the degrading of our consciousness. It's kind of like, you've seen in the floods, there's been these tar roads. And some of them, they're completely hollow underneath. Have you seen it? It's like the ground is eroded, but on the top it looks like it's a road. And it's dangerous, right? Because any car goes on it, if that tar cracks, it's going to go through. And that's what it's like when the underflow of your consciousness is offensive. On the surface it appears, I'm a good devotee. But underneath there's this hollowness. And the Shakti, the flow of mercy is being stifled until the tar cracks, then everybody can see it. Otherwise, externally, it just appears, oh, nothing's happening. So therefore, there must be no reaction to this mentality. But there is a reaction, you're just not seeing it. And the perfect example that Dinabandhu Prabhu gives in this regard is Subari Muni. There he was, under the ocean, in meditation for 1,000 years? 1,000 years underwater in meditation. Now that's yogic power, right? Like, how long are you going to be underwater? You do it when you're a kid. Like, most is like 60 seconds, 1.5 minutes maximum. Otherwise you die. But here he is, 1,000 years underwater. Looks like, I don't want to be offensive. so there he is, right? And then there's this, and you detach from the whole world. But who are you with under the water? There's people there, there's entities there. There's all the fish loka and all the fish residents. And he becomes attached to those residents because there comes Garuda and he mercilessly kills the king of the fish. And he sees all the fish in lamentation that the king is dead. And he's critical to Garuda. He curses Garuda, right? He curses Garuda. And who is Garuda? But the carrier of Lord Vishnu. And what happens to Subari Muni? Months and months later, he sees 2 fish mating. And he thinks, I should get married. I'm like, dear Subari Muni, please come to Kali Yuga, because we have to see a lot more than that. It's everywhere. I'm like, 2 fish copulating. Like, seriously? That was it? Seriously? Yes. Because the offensive mentality had degraded this Shakti that he built. So now, this becomes an issue. What was his issue? Lust. No. His issue was an offensive mentality. Because the offensive mentality allows the anarthas to blossom. You can't look at the flowers. You have to look at the seed. So, and then it detracts him, right? He comes out, sees the king, says, I want your daughters. The king is like that? Says, okay, let them choose. Subari gets the idea. He transforms himself into a beautiful something, and all 50 of them want him. So good luck now, you got 50 wives. Forward one a few thousand years. He thinks like, oh my God, what happened? I was under the water meditating, and then? I used to be such a good devotee, like it used to be so nice devotional service, and like, how did I end up here? Bhakti is easy, but to try to avoid defensive mentality is hard. So I'm going to stop there, and if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, we can take it now. Yes, Ranga.
Hare Krishna. Speaking about giving class, the first time I sat on the Vyasasan, I really wanted to give the class, and I told the person in charge that, I'd like to give a class. And because of my shortcomings, the class only lasted about maybe 5 to 15 minutes, I think. And I prepared a whole lot, but it just lasted, such a short time. And then after that, it was granted Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. And I was like, oh. I was amazed. And I was like, what happened, So, we have to have that eagerness to do it, to do the service. And with that will come the Shakti to actually do it properly. So,
Sure. I must balance that. For some people, it's really not their nature. It's really not their nature. And then, I'm not, so it's like, there's things for me that's really not my nature. If you make me balance the accounting books, I'll do it, but I will die doing it, So for some people, it's really not their nature. If they choose not to, okay. But you need to ask yourself honestly, is it because it's not my nature? Or is it my false ego? Only you can answer that question, Nobody else can judge and say, that one said that. You can't. It's all just within you have to know, Thank you. Anybody else have a thought? Okay. You want to say something, Justin? You good?
You were talking about fearlessness, and especially with the example of giving class, but actually in any service that puts you kind of out in the eye of the public. Swami Bhagavan Keshav Swami gave a class about procrastination, and he was talking about how a lack of confidence actually causes us to procrastinate on various services or our various responsibilities or on things that we could do. And this lack of confidence comes from this fear that you were talking about. And fear and excitement, they actually come from the same place. So whereas one person will become fearful, one person will become excited to give a class. And this is just transforming this adrenaline, actually, this feeling of activity within the body. You can either get excited about it and think, this is an opportunity to serve Krishna, and in that way you can actually do something really nice. Or you can take that adrenaline and you can start becoming doubtful. You can start allowing these different these feelings of attachment to the results to come in, and that's how we become panicked and anxious about our various services. So it's just changing the mentality when entering a service. Changing that feeling within, that adrenaline within, into either excitement or fear.
Nice point. Thank you for sharing that. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande Hare